question and answers. But I always feel like it's helpful to give you a little bit of data, a little bit of information, maybe to try to help you understand about how to prevent heart disease, which is a passion of mine. So I do research in this area. I'll talk a little bit about the research we do, but mostly this is going to be very clinically focused. And so today I thought I would talk about exercise, and what a beautiful day to talk about it. I was saying when I leave here today, I have to go back downtown, but at first I have to stop and get my bike because I don't have a parking spot where I work. So I have to go get the bike and then ride in and then change back into regular clothes. Usually I'm on the bike about 6 in the morning to get to work and about 7 at night. But so I do practice what I preach, and I'm going to hopefully convince you today that you should be thinking about this. So I made this first slide because this is exactly the truth. If I was seeing you in clinic and you were asking me, can I write you a prescription? And I said to you, well, what if I said I could write a prescription that will reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease, it's going to improve your cognitive function, it's going to boost your mood and energy, and it's going to add on average 3 years to your life, and it won't cost you a penny. If I said this to any of my patients, they would jump up for joy. They would. But the truth is, that's what exercise can do. It's that important for you to think about, and I'm going to show you a lot of data that supports all the things that I just said in that first slide. And I can't think of a single medication or procedure that we do that will have the benefit of what I'm going to show you today has just from doing exercise. Now, I'm going to start with some sort of 10,000-foot view of the data, and you have to kind of look at this. You may or may not be able to see the writing from where you are, but these are data from the United States Department of Health and Human Services. And as you probably know, the guidelines that you can find on the internet that talk about exercise recommendations are pretty broad, and they cover fairly limited level of physical activities. And so, for example, you can see, I can't quite get this pointer to work here, but if you look at the slide, this is not heavy, intense exercise. This is 2.5 hours of moderate intensity exercise, like rapid walking. That would be 30 minutes, 5 days a week, or 1.25 hours of rigorous activity such as jogging. And if you see that in the first column here, if you do that, then you're going to add, on average, 3 years to your life, 3 years. And if you double the guidelines or triple the guidelines in terms of the amount of exercise you do, there's an incremental gain in terms of years of life added. And this is important, maybe not to you now because most of you are young, you're still in your prime, you're working. But think about it like this. When you've retired and now you have time to do what you want to do, think about being healthy and having 3 more years of that. So it's time to invest now to get that return on your investment when you really want it. Now, I've had a lot of people say to me, I can't exercise very well because of my condition of my body, or I'm overweight. So the question is, does it benefit you if you're overweight and you exercise? And the answer is it does. And if you look at these different categories, you can see on the far left is the normal weight, overweight is in the next column, and then we have people who have varying degrees of obesity moving towards the right. What you can see on the y-axis here is the number of years of life that can be gained from doing exercise. And you can see that a normal weight person is expected to gain about 4 years of life by doing regular exercises, which is dramatic, isn't it? 4 years. Now, obviously, if you're very obese, you're not going to gain that many years. And notice also that you've got a lot more to lose if you carry that extra weight, because regardless of which fitness category you're in, if you are obese, you're going to probably live less number of years than your normal weight counterparts. But even if you are in the extreme obese range, if you exercise regularly, you are expected to gain probably at least 2 to 3 years of life just from doing that. So that in of itself is a reason, isn't it, to commit yourself. And this is a regular exercise regimen I'm talking about. The people that make the commitment around the 1st of January every year to go to the gym and do all these things, that do it for a couple of weeks, you don't gain any benefit from that. What I'm talking about is habitual changes in your activity level and long-term exercise. Now, I mentioned to you that exercise can improve your cognitive function, and here's data that support that. This study was conducted in an older population of older adults. What they did is they randomized these people to either an exercise regimen, physical exercise, or to just continued control regimen of usual activities in that population. And they made measurements of key aspects of cognitive function. The one on your far left is a complex function called executive function. What is that? That basically is what you do every day at your desk probably. These are complex activities that require a lot of cognitive function. So I don't know how many of you all have noticed, but if you exercise, I notice that my thinking is better. I don't know if other people have the same feeling as I do, but I know for sure that when I exercise regularly, my mind is quicker and sharper, and these data bear it out. On the far right is the processing speed. So you can see in older individuals, if they're put onto the exercise program, their ability to process information faster is better. So these data also suggest then that the more active you are, the more likely that your mind will be functional in those later years, the less likely perhaps that you will be to suffer the decline that ends up leading to you being in a facility where someone has to take care of you. So I tell my patients this every day. Don't just exercise for your heart, exercise for your mind. How does this happen? This is an area of great interest right now in the research world, and we and others are trying to understand the factors that are responsible. And this is a complex scheme, and it shows you a little bit about how we approach these problems from the scientific standpoint. We try to understand what it is in the body that's responsible for transducing these responses, say that maybe start in the skeletal muscle and end up in your brain. And you can see when you exercise, your skeletal muscle releases this whole host of factors, and some of these factors are called myokines. These are hormones, if you will, that are released from your skeletal muscles. And some of these myokines can actually travel into the brain and function as neurotropic factors, and these neurotropic factors can improve the neurogenesis and synaptic plasticity in your brain and therefore improve your memory and your ability to learn. They also can affect the adipose tissues, and these myokines can favorably influence factors released from your fat tissue. So the exercise itself and the impact on your skeletal muscle has these profound and distant influences even on your brain. Still a lot of learning here, and if we can figure out what some of these factors are, we might be able to design pharmacological approaches that might mimic the effect of exercise on your brain. So not only do you see an improvement in your cognitive function, but most of you who exercise know that you have a better sense of well-being. And if any of you have yourself have depression or have friends or family members with depression, you know that one of the cornerstones of therapy is exercise, and it has dramatic effects on your mood. And these are data that really bear that out, and this is a very global assay of mental functioning and mental health. And what you can see here is in the whole group of subjects, this is a mixture of people with and without depression, there's an improvement in their sense of well-being, the score of well-being shown on the top. And those who have frank depression also get improvement in their mental well-being through exercise. It may be hard for you to see this, but what's listed on this scale here are the different kinds of physical activities and what the effects of those will have on the improvement in the well-being score. And so even just walking has a favorable effect. And this is why we tell people if that's all you can do, then walk. But as you climb up the scale of intensity, in general, there's a pretty good correlation with the intensity of the exercise that you do and the improvement in your mental well-being. So cornerstone of therapy for mental health. How many of you knew that exercise can reduce the risk of cancers? Did anyone know this? Well, okay, we know one person knows this. But it turns out there's actually a pretty significant effect on reducing cancer incidence in people that exercise. Of course, it's always hard to separate what did the exercise do versus the other things that people do when they exercise. Most people that are into exercise also eat right. They eat healthy. And why is that? Well, I could tell you, if you go to McDonald's and you eat a Happy Meal or a Big Mac or whatever, and then you try to go run after that, you can't do it. So for those people who build their lives around their exercise, they have to eat right because they're not going to be able to do that exercise comfortably. So it's hard to separate the effects of diet from exercise, but to the best we can tell, regular exercises has a significant impact on breast cancer in particular. There's also some data to suggest reductions in colorectal cancer, endometrial cancer, and several other kinds of cancer. And so as a consequence of this, not only does the American Heart Association recommend exercise, but so does the American Cancer Society and other societies as well. Now, what I'm going to spend quite a bit of time talking about in a moment is how much exercise, et cetera, et cetera. So I know many of you have questions about that, which we'll go over in a moment. So beginning to get into this, we now have some meta-analysis data that's beginning to tell us or give us better information about how much exercise and how intense the exercise can be to optimize your health. So these are data from a very large study, nearly 500,000 people in Taiwan, that actually looked at the association between exercise and all-cause reduction in mortality. And this is really interesting data, and it illustrates 2 points. Number one, any kind of exercise has a benefit, right? I think you can see the percent reduction can range anywhere from, say, on the low end, 10% if you don't do very much, all the way perhaps up to a 50% reduction in all-cause mortality. And you can see there seems to be a exercise dose response. The more you do to a point, the greater the benefit. You also can see that you can get a better dose of this by doing more intense exercise like running, right? So you only have to do, say, 10 minutes of running to equal the benefit that you would get from 40 or 50 minutes of walking. So for people that are crushed for time like me, where every minute counts, that's why I use my bike for commuting. I mean, I get heavy exercise when I'm going to and from work every day. So my advice is that you try to find a way to capitalize on this information if you can, to work it into your day so that you get this incredible benefit. Now, looking at the incremental benefits of exercise on the various components of mortality, and I have to kind of show you what this gets at here, but I'm going to first point out this all-cause mortality curve, and you can see it going down, indicating this incremental improvement. What this relates to would be, for example, the equivalent of just 15 minutes a day at each level. So 15 minutes would be considered a low level of exercise, and for every increment going from medium to high to very high, you add 15 more minutes. So even at 15 minutes, there's a significant reduction in all-cause mortality, cancer mortality, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes. But as you can see, if you can increase that incrementally, you get more and more gain. And this is why a lot of people say, you know, the 30 minutes that's recommended a day may not be optimal. And I'm going to talk about that in more detail. It depends on what you consider optimal. First of all, it's important that whatever it is, you do it. So you should be honest with yourself and say, what can I do that I can habitually keep up every week? But I want you to try to think, can I do more than what they are telling me I should do, or what people in the general public think is beneficial? And this data really bears it out. Now, there's another important thing to consider, and that is the impact of just something as simple as walking speed. How many of you all know that people that walk faster live longer? Did you all know this? I know I get criticized a lot because I walk fast, and everybody thinks I'm busy, which I am. But truthfully, the reason I walk fast is this fact right here. The faster you walk in general, the greater your survival will be as you age. And it's kind of hard to see these data, but I think you can easily see from the top to the bottom the impact of increasing walking speed, even by a little bit. And you all have noticed probably older people that walk very slowly, that move slowly. These are people who are more likely to have bad outcomes and have a shorter lifespan. Now, some of that may be due to what's called frailty as you get older. People who are frail are not going to be able to move as easily and as readily. But a lot of the frailty can be combated by good exercise when you're at the stage of life that you are now. So if you invest in your body now, you're less likely to become frail when you're older. Your bone structure will be better. Your muscles will be stronger. And so as you age and you go through a phase, once you hit the age of 40, I hate to tell everyone, about the age of 40, you begin losing muscle mass every year, right? You lose muscle mass, you lose skeletal bone, you lose cardiovascular performance. So we all have to face that we lose this slowly, and there's no way to combat aging. So the best way that you can prevent the disease from taking your life away is to build up as much as you can when you're younger. Do it now when you're younger. Build it up so that when you start that inevitable decline, you're going to be functioning well. Make an effort to walk fast. How does it hurt you to walk a little faster? Walk a little faster. Just walk a little faster. You know, concentrate on that every single day. And I know this data is hard to see, but there's other data also that show that even in people with established heart disease, and this is a study of men, but men who have established heart disease that can walk faster on the treadmill have a far better outcome than those who can't. I mean, this is a huge difference in percentage survival between a man who can walk 5 to 8 kilometers per hour on the top in the black and green versus someone who can't walk 3.8 kilometers per hour. Look at the effects of survival 10 years later. 95% of the men that could walk fast are going to be alive at 10 years. And 25% of those that can't are going to be dead at 10 years. 5% versus 25%. That's a huge, huge difference. How much of that is because of the fast walking, I can't tell you. but I think the fast walking goes along with being more active, being healthier, having better cardiovascular function and fitness. Probably also, more attention to your eating habits and other health habits. So how much is optimal? That's a big question, right? I don't know that I'll be able to give you an absolute answer today, but because the data are coming out and we're getting more and more detailed data from very large studies, studies like this are beginning to give us a clue. And what you can see here is each of these lines represents a different condition. The one at the very top in the brown is breast cancer, for example. And so what you can see is the relative risk, one being an average risk, coming down the scale, 0.7 would be a 30% risk reduction. Does everyone follow this roughly? So you can see with regard to breast cancer, even if you're exercising a lot, you can't expect a huge reduction in the risk of breast cancer, maybe a 10% reduction. But taken in contrast to that, ischemic heart disease in the red, I think you can see that if you exercise regularly, you can expect at least a 30% risk reduction in ischemic heart disease. Likewise, take a look at stroke in the blue, almost the same level of potential risk reduction, and so on. So when you look at these data, you kind of get a general idea that it intersects, all of these data seem to intersect right there, and this is in the range of 4 MET minutes in thousands per week, 4,000 MET minutes per week. Now, I know none of you one person understands what that is. Nobody else knows what 4,000 MET minutes is, but I'm going to explain it to you on the next slide so you really understand. But I want you to keep in mind that that's what the data are suggesting. All right, so let's put that into perspective. What is a MET? That's also known as a metabolic equivalent, and that's basically the amount of oxygen that you're consuming right now sitting in the chair listening to this talk. So at rest, we know that that's essentially been normalized to 1 MET of oxygen consumption as to how much you would, on average, be consuming at rest. Now, the more active you are, the more oxygen you consume, right? So if you're out running right now, you're going to consume a lot more oxygen because that has to be delivered to your working muscles to execute that work. So the World Health Organization has made this recommendation of a total of 600 METs of activity per week. And that's essentially the same as the Health and Human Services guidelines that I showed you earlier on the first slide. Equivalent to about 150 minutes a week of brisk walking, 30 minutes 5 days a week, or 75 minutes a week of running. And that's the WHO and the HHS recommendations. But I already told you that what looks to be optimal is much more than that, 4,000 METs a week. So I think the guidelines and the recommendations are the bare minimum, and I think they're designed to sort of say, okay, everyone in society can probably do this. Almost everybody can walk 30 minutes 5 days a week, right? But I think I hopefully have convinced you that's probably not enough if you really want to be healthy and derive these benefits later in your life. How many of you in the room use the facilities here? I hear you guys have a free facility where you can work out. So not that many. I wish I had this. We don't have it where I work. You have to pay to use it. And I couldn't use it anyway at work because inconvenient. It's on the other side of campus. You all are really lucky to have that facility. And boy, I sure wish that everyone had that. So again, sort of putting this into perspective about level of exercise, level of exertion, this lists a whole bunch of activities. There's good news and bad news here. Even if you're sitting and watching TV, you're actually doing something, right? You're at the equivalent of 1 MET, so you're actually consuming some energy. But if you're sitting there watching TV and you're eating snacks, you obviate whatever benefit you get, right? But as you go up the trail here, you can see that even just a regular walk is going to probably triple how much oxygen you consume, how much energy you burn. And that's a good thing. But as I showed you, if you want to get benefit from walking, probably to give you the level of benefit that is optimal, it is going to be a ton of walking. I mean, you would have to be walk, walk, walk all the time. So what makes more sense is to do something, if you can, that's going to be higher intensity. Average jogging at a low pace, a slow pace, what I would say probably for me might even be a fast walk. You can see that that brings you up quite a bit to a much higher level, to a state where you could cut your time down dramatically. Oops. And then, as you see in the red, heavy workouts like free weights, if you do a lot of heavy weight work, that generates much more oxygen consumption. And then, of course, rigorous cycling or fast running will even get more. So I'd say, how do you afford not to look at something here that you might be able to do? There's so many different things. Rowing machines are feasible. work very well for some people. Swimming, of course, you hear about less impactful on your joints. But I think that there's a wide spectrum of things you can do. Now, some people really physically cannot do anything, and I have patients like this, and it's really sad when you see someone come in who has disease and they cannot exercise at all. So I'm talking to you today because if I can prevent that from happening, then I have done my job, and that's much better than trying to deal with the consequences of it in someone who can't function and can't exercise. We are doing research in this area, and this is a study that actually was done here in Augusta. This that I have taken was a news publicity that was in Forbes. This was about 1.5 years or 2 years ago. Does anyone know what whole body vibration is? Have you heard of this before? It's a novel form of exercise, and you can see this woman is on what's called a vibrating platform. These are platforms that essentially vibrate at a very rapid rate. And when you put yourself on there, and most people tend to stand on these, although you can also use your hands, you can sit on them, you can do a number of things. They shake your body very, very fast, and your brain is interpreting that to mean that you're unstable. And what it does is it tries to counteract that by tensing your muscles. And so sort of involuntarily, your muscles are reacting to this fast shaking, and it has a dramatic effect on metabolism. So this was a study that was done in mice, but we're seeing the same results in a lot of people that are using this kind of a modality. And now if you go into health centers, you often see these vibrating platforms because everybody can use them, even older people. There's also data to show that this kind of exercise can reduce bone loss in older people and can help maintain core strength. So there seems to be some benefits to this whole body vibration. And actually, at our institution, there's a large study going on now looking at the impact of whole body vibration and the products that are produced by the muscles. You know, I mentioned earlier on that the muscles are producing these myokines that circulate in the blood. They may be able to go to your brain to improve your cognitive function. So we're looking at the impact of this kind of exercise on products that are being made by the skeletal muscle, trying to understand how it might be beneficial and what might be ways to optimize this kind of an activity. Whether or not you guys have one of these here, I don't know. Maybe something worth considering. All right, so I'm going to just finish this, the first part of it with take-home points, and then we can have an open discussion. So I really believe that exercise is extremely beneficial, and not only to your health, but to your well-being. It's certainly better than any pill. And I mean, personally, I don't take any medications. I rely really on diet and exercise, and I do that more or less because I feel like if you do that extremely well, that may be the most valuable thing you can do. So many of my patients don't do that, and they take the pills, but they don't eat right and they don't exercise, and I wonder how much benefit are they getting? I think I'm getting more benefit than they are because of the attention that I'm able to place on these things. And if you incorporate regular exercise into your life, you can absolutely expect that you will reduce your risk of developing many, many, many diseases, including even cancer. And you can expect to lengthen your lifespan anywhere from 3 to perhaps 5 years, depending upon the level of fitness that you attain. I think there's no doubt that the current activity recommendations that you all are familiar with, that we all know about, are insufficient to afford optimal protection. And you should think hard about this and say, how can I take advantage of what we know can help me as I grow older? The most important advice I can give to you, though, is to find something you enjoy doing and stick to it. There is no one-size-fits-all policy for this. What works for me may not work for anybody else in this room. Some people may be doing things that I couldn't do. But I know that there is something for everyone, for sure. There is something for everyone. And then the last thing, stay active at home and at work. I never take the elevators, never. The only time I ever take the elevators is when I'm working with a team of residents that absolutely won't exercise, and I can't get them to walk the stairs. Sometimes I push them to do it, and I notice they're huffing and puffing, and I stop. But I virtually do not take the elevator. And even if I have to go to the 9th floor, I don't care. I mean, I'll walk to the 9th floor. So I do that. If I go somewhere in the car, I'll park as far away as I can from the entrance. I never park near the entrance. I park as far away as I can. And by the way, your car is less likely to get dinged by a shopping cart if you do that. So there's other reasons. And then, as I said, practice walking faster. When you get out of here today, just try it. See what happens if you pick up your speed. You start walking faster. So what if you sweat a little bit, right? We're all meant to sweat a little bit. Who cares? I mean, you can get antiperspirant, but seriously. All right, and I end on this, and I'll be happy to take your answers. We can have an open discussion and hopefully answer some questions, and thanks for your attention. All right, who's got questions that we can all discuss? I know people have to have some questions about this. I mean, this is pretty provocative, what I've just thrown out. Yes, sir. That's a great question. So number one, I hardly ever eat out. Unfortunately, this week I had to eat out twice because we had people in town for recruitment purposes. But if I do eat out, then I try to make up by eating healthier, the next couple of days. But I think eating out is the biggest problem. A lot of people do that habitually. I know people that eat out every day. They stop in a fast food place. If you don't do that, it's actually pretty easy. So I bring my lunch every day, and it's always going to be healthy. I'm going to have yogurt that's fat-free. I'll have nuts and fruit to eat mostly. I mean, I'm the same every day, and my wife laughs at me. Wonders, how can you eat the same thing every day? Well, I have different kinds of yogurt that I eat. So, I mean, I plan it. And then, when I get home at night, so the first thing I do almost every night is I make a really big salad. And that salad's going to have a lot of variety in it of healthy things that are green and low calorie. I like things like, fresh snap peas. And I don't know how many, I shouldn't make a pitch, but does anyone here shop at Lidl or Lidl? So if you go to Lidl, they have like a broccoli slaw that's just unbelievable. And they chop all of these things into it, and it's really flavorful. So I add things like that into the salad. And if you eat a big salad like that up front, it actually satiates you a little bit. So you're less hungry to eat all the things that are calorically dense. And so people ask this, for me, it's just not hard at all. I just do these simple little things. I mean, she works at Doctor's Hospital, and her schedule is different than mine. She's very busy, too. So when we do cook together, we are pretty healthy overall. We're attentive. I don't eat any red meat, number one, virtually none. I think red meat, I don't see any health benefit to it at all. There is none. And so I try to stay away from it. But we cook pretty healthy. And yes, she's probably as lean or leaner than I am. She exercises, too. And it is easy if you do that together. I do. I love to eat fish, but I'm terrible at cooking the fish. I'm starting to learn better, but if I go out to eat, I always will get fish. And yes, you're right. Chicken, I eat it very lean. Don't fry it. There's no skin on it. Things like that. Yeah, I mean, we use oil when we cook, but it's usually going to be olive oil, if at all possible. It's hard to use it on the grill, but we use olive oil like if we cook potatoes and broil them or something like that. So, yeah, I mean, there's lots of different tricks. I'm not a nutrition expert per se, but I think that it is easy to be pretty healthy. And I can also tell you, like when we go to the store, we spend much more time in the fresh vegetable section than we do anywhere else. I mean, I'll spend 2/3 of my time getting fresh vegetables and things like that, and then 1/3 of the time getting everything else. So I also do drink beer. I drink a beer every day. I think there's lots of interest in fermented foods right now for their health benefits. They do. We think fermented foods do have health benefits for the microbiota. So, I mean, for the most part, people are studying things like yogurt and kimchi, which is a Korean food, sauerkraut. But I think beer may have benefits as well because of the fermentation. So I just drink one a day, but what's that? One a day? I don't think so. Yeah. One a day. Actually, there's quite a bit of data to suggest that low levels of alcohol consumption do offer protection against various kinds of diseases. So if you look at the data, in people that drink one alcoholic beverage a day, in general, study after study show reductions in mortality. I think the problem is, can people, go off the wagon there and drink a lot? Well, if you're an alcoholic, of course, you can't. You can't drink any if you're an alcoholic, but very few people are. Most people that I know are like me, and they drink one a day, and there's real health benefit to that. Yes. I think that both work. So I'm convinced of what I've seen with the data with interval training. And, I kind of showed you with regard to sort of intensity of exercise, it does matter. And I think interval training works for a lot of people. I think some people are comfortable doing that and others aren't. I prefer things that are more steady because I kind of like my mind to wander when I exercise. I like to be able to, I feel like in a way the cognitive benefit comes with me being distracted. And so I don't know that for me interval training would work. But I think if you're really into that, it has real benefits. I'm convinced of what I've seen. Do you agree with my statement about the interval training? They're both, yeah. Yeah. So I think it is about what works best for you. I really do. Also, I will tell you that the other reason I think the biking works for me so well is I'm on that bike, I think I told you, usually 6 or 6:30 in the morning, and I live in Forest Hill, so I have to go down the steep hill, and it's dark. And I tell you, if your brain isn't awake and processing at this time, then it is terrifying. It would be worse than riding any roller coaster you can ever imagine. And so your brain has to be working really fast to do this, and I think it's helpful. I have to know where every single thing is in the road, and I have to be able to react so fast to try to avoid something from happening. It's a little scary, but if you adapt to it, then I've never had a problem, and I feel like by the time I get to work, I am completely awake. I mean, there is no chance that I would be sleepy when I get to work. Yes. I don't believe in it. So, I mean, if you look at the short-term effects of it, of course it works. I mean, anybody can show that if you do that for a short period of time, you're going to lose weight. I have not seen a study that suggests that people can stick to that. And I would argue, too, that many of the other diet fads that you read about are just not sustainable for the most part. They just aren't. So I kind of follow what I would consider to be more of a Mediterranean-style diet. What I described to you, my eating patterns would be Mediterranean, and it works. You can stick with it. The foods taste good. They're healthy, and the benefit is dramatic. All the data that I've seen and all the cardiology literature suggests that, too. So I don't know that it's so much about how much weight you will lose, but it's about how healthy you'll be. So I think that, in my opinion anyway, getting on a sustainable plan like a Mediterranean diet makes more sense. Yeah, you'll lose some weight. You may not lose as much, but you're going to be really healthy if you do that. Yes. Yeah, well, I think the data with women and calcium are really directed more towards the bone loss, osteoporosis, right? So I think for average women, it's appropriate. Again, I would argue, though, that if you really pay attention to your eating patterns and you exercise, you're hopefully going to have some effect to prevent the bone loss. But I would not tell you not to take the calcium supplements because osteoporosis is a real problem. And if you get older and you lose your bone mass, I mean, ultimately, if you do live long enough, you'll become frail. All of us will. Men get osteoporosis too, by the way. So the best advice I can give to you is that you need to get your bone density calculated at some point. I assume you have done that or will do that. Yeah, I think it can. Yeah. I think the weight-bearing exercises is stronger, more powerful. It is. So I think if you do that, then you're going to be in better shape. Your cortical bone will be more dense if you have the weight-bearing exercises. A lot of people, I'm surprised nobody's asked yet, can you overdo it? Can you overdo it? I think the answer is you can, okay? And I'll just tell you an example of a patient I took care of that really shocked me. I won't tell you his name because he lives in the community, but this is a gentleman who has been extremely active his whole life. In fact, was in the military, very active. Got out of the military, has a very high-profile position in finance in the community, has remained extremely active, very avid runner, and in fact was doing triathlons. And so he came in to see me. He's about my age, or a few years younger than I am. But he noticed when he was running, he started getting chest discomfort. He ends up in to be evaluated, And it turns out he has a small heart attack. So I asked him, I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, this guy's in his mid-50s, but he's thin as a rail. He eats like a bird. He's in incredible shape. So I'm asking him about his training patterns, and this guy was what a triathlon is. So he was running a half marathon. It's 13 miles. And he was averaging 7.5 minutes a mile for 13 miles at age 54. Okay, that's an example of what kind of condition this guy was in. And then he would get on the bike and go 100 miles or whatever it was, and he would swim a mile. That's what this guy was doing. And so I was shocked when he had a heart attack, and I was even more shocked when we investigated and found out he had severe multivessel coronary disease and had to have bypass surgery. And you can ask, how is this possible? Well, I will tell you, there are a few studies that are emerging that show that people who do that level of extreme exercise have an increased incidence of coronary calcifications on their CT scans, that we can see evidence of calcification in the arteries. What we don't know is it causally linked or not? And nobody knows for sure, but because this has been reported, and I've seen it at least in one patient, I do think it's possible you can overdo it. I think that like other aspects of physiology, there can be what we call a J-shaped curve, where you want to find that point that's right where it should be to lower risk, but if you get to a certain level of activity, it's conceivable that you can increase risk. We also know that people who run marathons acutely do face an increased risk of an event. I used to staff what's called the Flying Pig Marathon in Cincinnati when I lived there, and every year we would set up a ICU hospital and as well as an intake center for people that were running this marathon, and every single year I would have at least one person that had cardiac arrest on that course, so we would have to defibrillate, and every time it happened, they ended up having coronary disease as the cause. I didn't see a single person that had some other reason for this, and they were mostly middle-aged people. So that level of extreme exercise may pose a small risk. That's why I think if you have any concern about your health, you should check with your doctor first before you embark in a rigorous exercise program, especially if you have symptoms or risk factors. How is it possible that there can be too much exercise? I don't have the answer for sure, but think about it this way. When you do a marathon, you're punishing your body. You can measure enzymes in your blood that are leaking out of your damaged cells from this level of heavy work. You hemolyze red blood cells when you do that. So I think there is such a thing as causing some tissue injury. And what we do think, at least hypothetically, if you damage mitochondria, and these are the energy-producing organelles in your cells that generate all the ATP that your muscle uses, if you damage the mitochondria, then products that come out of the mitochondria may cause an immunologic reaction. And why is that? Because mitochondria, believe it or not, probably come from bacteria. I don't know if you know this, but phylogenetically, the mitochondria in our cells appear to have been derived from bacteria way back in time during evolution. So normally, we don't see mitochondrial proteins in the blood, and if you see them, your body may react to these proteins as if it's an invading organism, and this may create a situation where there's an immune reaction. And actually, this is the focus of a very large NIH study going on at AU, looking at this hypothesis in terms of causing high blood pressure. So I think that's my guess anyway, that overdoing it or pushing yourself too hard may not be helpful. It may be potentially harmful. And by the way, that patient is doing well now after all that's been done, but he no longer does that level of exercise anymore. Now he's back to doing what I might do or you might do, and he's healthy. Yes. Oh, that's okay. Did you say the leptin paradox? Is that what you said? Plant paradox? I don't know. I think that eating, vegetable and plant-based products is proven to be healthy in study after study. So, mhm. Well, your body produces a lot of molecules that look a lot like lectin. And we know that some of those molecules actually can be pro-inflammatory. So there's a whole series of therapeutic drugs being developed to try to block those immune pathways. Whether or not that will turn out to be important, we don't know yet. So I think he's a little early in making those recommendations. But I certainly would not encourage people to go away from a plant-based diet. I think that study after studies have shown that, you know, eating that kind of a diet has big health benefits. I didn't bring that data, but I could have brought it. And that includes also fruits, you know, which also contain similar types of molecules. So I'm not sure I agree with that one. What's his name again? Yeah. No, I mean, I think that it's pretty clear that one diet doesn't fit everyone either. I think there's absolute truth to that. In vegetarian-based diets, I mean, the data with vegetarian-based diets are strong, in my opinion. I think if you eat a vegetarian-based diet, as long as you pay attention to micronutrients and proteins, it's very healthy. I've seen no data to suggest that there's detriment. Is anybody else aware of anything like that? I mean, I guess theoretically, but there could be some risk. But, you know, the body is adaptable, and we're able to process lots of nutrients in our gut. So that's why I was bringing up the point about fermented foods. The fermented foods are good for your microbiota. So a lot of what you ingest, like that contain a lot of the lectins, is going to be degraded extensively by the microbiota. Part of the problem with not eating enough vegetables, if you don't get enough fiber in your diet through normal means, you know what the microbiota does? It digests the lining of your intestines. So it's going to have to get its nourishment somewhere. If you don't feed your microbiota, it's going to feed on you. So I'm a big believer in vegetable-based diets for that reason, in terms of feeding the microbiota in your body. So there's a lot of evidence that points towards that. This is, again, evolving. Last year at the American Heart Association meeting, they had a whole symposium on fermented foods and talked a lot about these concepts of feeding the microbiota and giving it a healthy diet. I noticed from the kind of diet I eat, which does have a lot of vegetable-based products, you don't need to take any kind of supplements at all. I mean, your gut gets what it needs. They're happy, and it's, you know, it seems to work. So there's a lot of money to be made, isn't there, on nutraceuticals, exercise products. There is a lot of money to be made on it. I'm not a big believer in that. I don't spend much money on any of this stuff. You know, I have a bike that I've had for 14 or 15 years. Every year I probably put $100 into that bike to keep it tip-top so I don't have an accident, you know, in the morning going down the hill or something. But I don't have expensive equipment in my home. I've just got some free weights that I work with. So you really don't need a lot of money for that. Same thing with the diets. I just don't know that it's so critical to get on these plans. You see these dietary plans, and I don't know how much benefit those have long term. Do other people have experience with working with those plans? Some people say they work, but I mean, I think that's true, but I have to tell you, I saw a patient this week who about 2 years ago came in, and he was really, really overweight. Okay, I can't tell you how overweight he was, but very, very morbidly obese. And he went on the Atkins diet, right? So I saw him shortly after he went on the Atkins diet, and he had lost, I can't remember when I first saw him, 10 kilograms, 22 pounds. I was like, wow, I'm really surprised, but I expected exactly that when I saw him a year later, he would come back and he would have put that back on and then some. Well, then I saw him a year later and he lost another 10 kilograms and he was still on it. And I was like, wow, I can't believe this. So I just saw him again this week, and now he's on the crux of not even being obese anymore. He went from being morbidly obese to now just being overweight. He's managed to stay on this diet. He went from a size, I think he was telling me he was a size 52 or 54 waist pants. He had to completely get a new wardrobe. I mean, he lost, I don't even know how many belt sizes, but He told me that, you know, he has been able to stay on it. He said that kind of a diet for him controlled his eating urges. So he's eating a lot of nuts. He does eat things like nuts with this. So it's not exactly maybe a perfect Atkins type diet, but he noticed certain things, and cheese too, that he said will suppress his appetite, and he has to stay away from all carbohydrates. He told me that his problem was the carbohydrates. Once he got completely, as much as possible, off of them, it really worked. And so I do think there's truth to that, that some diets work with some people, and you may just have to try things. You know, that's what he did. And she saw him year after year, and nothing ever happened until that one shift that he made, and has been able to keep it off. So. Me? Not too often. I mean, I get a flu vaccine every year, but I'm around sick people all the time. So unfortunately, you know, it's hard not to pick up viruses when you're around people all the time. But no, I'm really healthy. So don't take medicine, hardly ever miss a day of work. You know, just about never, I almost never go to a doctor. I'm ashamed to say that I can't even think of the last time I actually went into a physician myself. Yeah, but I mean, no, it's not. But you'd be surprised how many of my colleagues, I ask the same question, and almost no one that I work with goes to doctors or gets any kind of care. I know. It's not that. I don't know. I think we're all busy, I guess, is part of the excuse. Part of it, too, is that if you live a healthy lifestyle, maybe erroneously you think you're going to live forever. You know, you feel like you're going to not get anything, but I don't encourage that. I know that you should go to your physician. I'll be the first to say. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I think there is absolutely truth to that for sure. And I'm not an exercise physiologist, but you're correct that your body will adapt to what you do. So it's important that you work out and use different kinds of techniques if you can. I still say though, doing the same thing every day is better than not doing anything. If you adapt to a certain exercise and you can do it, what I do is I try to do a little more, a little faster, you know, because I don't have the time to run to the gym and go through all the circuit training. So I do things against gravity and stuff like that. But yeah, technically you're right. If you want to get in great shape, my son played football, and when he was training for football, he did crazy stuff. You know, he did things that I just couldn't even believe that somebody would do to gain strength in certain muscle groups. And, you know, running on a treadmill at 20 miles an hour, that is scary. So I know people who are really serious about it will do that kind of training, but that's just not for me. Anybody else? Well, I hope this was helpful and informative. You know, if I come back next year, I think about next year when I come back, I'm gonna take a poll to see how many people increase their exercise over the year after this talk. I'm really hopeful to hear that people got this message and found some way.
So much for coming.
Oh, thank you.